Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Ronan Keating of not quite live tweeting, Jack Slack. It's the Jack Slack podcast, and we're coming at you. Well, I'm recording this Sunday night. We're coming at you Monday, probably. I'm on the road. So, disclaimer, I haven't watched all of this event. I'm not going to talk about all of it. Maybe we'll touch in on the other stuff on the Boycast later in the week. But I wanted to talk about the main event because it was so terrific. We hoped it would be terrific. We said this is a great matchup, stylistically. Great matchup in terms of accolades. Just who is doing stuff in MMA right now, and it's these two. And yeah, it was doubly weird because the rest of the card wasn't super stacked, and the UFC doubled down by not promoting it at all, instead focusing on hourly tweets about Power Slap, including Dana White, who spent the week forgetting Islam Makhachev's name, and then didn't go to the event in Australia. But that's all bollocks. The good stuff was the fight. I thought this was absolutely terrific. I thought I expect there will be people coming in and they will moan about how positive I am on Volkanovski, as if that's some kind of slight on Makhachev. Makhachev is the best lightweight in the world. Don't think anyone's arguing with that right now. Well, they might be arguing that Volkanovski is, but until this fight, Makhachev was the best lightweight in the world. It's one of the strongest divisions in the world. It's historically a ridiculously strong division in which basically any number of title defenses is incredible. And Volkanovski was doing something ridiculous by going up in weight to fight Makhachev. It's possible to go up in weight to a worse division. Sometimes that happens at heavyweight. Now, there are different problems you'll encounter going up to heavyweight because you aren't dealing with a 10-pound jump. You're dealing with a infinite pound up to 265-pound jump. You could be a guy who's making 205 and now suddenly you're fighting guys who are struggling to get to 265. But generally, I think this and maybe Cejudo's are the hardest, jump ups I've seen. McGregor, Eddie Alvarez was always an elite fighter. He's a great fighter. Even when he fought McGregor, he was a great fighter. But stylistically, that one was quite favourable for McGregor. And of course, Amanda Nunes, we don't even care about that double belt. It doesn't really matter. Because they could add a women's lightweight division and give her a belt for fighting the same people she's fighting at bantamweight and featherweight, but heavier. Then you consider that Islam Makhachev is a big lad. He's a big lightweight. Him and Khabib both have had big trouble with weight cuts in the past because they're willing to go to the brink of kidney failure to get every ounce of advantage they can in a fight. And, they, in addition to being technically brilliant and very, very strong, being massive is a big advantage. So for Alexander Volkanovski to fight as well as he did here was flabbergasting. I was slapped upside the head by his brilliance in this fight. Now, it was a back-and-forth fight. Do not get mad at me for praising Volkanovski, but he was doing it with, walking around 20 pounds lighter than Islam Makhachev. And before we get into the details of the fight, can I just say how stupid everything about pound for pound is now? Pound for pound was invented so that boxing writers could talk about Sugar Ray Robinson, how brilliant he was, how he was the best fighter in the world, but he would still lose if he fought like a light heavyweight or a heavyweight, because that is a hard thing to reconcile for Joe Average. So the idea is that per pound of body weight, he's the best, skill-wise. It is a compliment of someone's skill. It's not a list of accomplishments, and it isn't a fucking belt that you can win from someone, especially if they're the one coming up in weight. If you have a close fight with someone who's from the weight class below, you don't become a pound-for-pound better fighter than them because they almost beat you and they're smaller. So with that out of the way, and I will say any detailed breakdown of who your pound for pound is, I don't give a shit. I will never give a shit. Pound for pound is stupid. But if you're going to use the words, know what they mean. But this is just another facet of us being held to ransom by a panel of guys who do the UFC rankings. 12 guys now, dropped from 14 because they just got bored. 2 of them got bored doing it. And it's just 12 randomers from random radio shows in Manaus. Some of them work for websites who haven't published an article in 3 years. So, the fight. Let's talk about it. Let's wrap. I unlocked the Advanced Striking 2.0 of Alexander Volkanovski. Go check that out. If you aren't a Patreon boy, go check it out because it's free for everyone now. But that was to say, sorry for missing Monday podcast. And just because it's cool. Go read that stuff. However, all the stuff in that tended to be about what he does against mainly orthodox opponents. Islam Makhachev, obviously southpaw and doesn't switch. Max Holloway did fight southpaw for periods of their fights, but he's a switch hitter. So, a lot of those fights was also just against another orthodox fighter. When Max did go southpaw in their first fight, Volkanovski did what is called a shifting right hook. He stepped through and threw the right hook as a southpaw. It's a big move. He has to do a big move because he's a small man. He has to cover a lot of distance. So what he does is he slips his head either to the outside of the opponent's lead shoulder or ducks it down towards the opponent's chest, steps all the way through with his right foot, and then throws the right hook from almost on top of the opponent. But it's a real commitment to get there, which is what made him so susceptible against Max in the second fight to knees and uppercuts, intercepting knees and intercepting uppercuts as he was stepping in. And you saw Makhachev trying to do that. He landed a couple of good knees here. It's this thing where Volkanovski has to go hard. He has to go fast and move through all that distance to get to the guy. That's never going to be something that he, just doesn't have to do because he's small. But he can make it very hard for people to time him by showing lots of feints, lots of fakes, lots of false entries. And that's why it is so hard for most of these opponents to time him. Everyone sees that big shift and they know it's a big move, but he still gets away with it. And that was the shift that, it was a huge part of his game in this one. He didn't do an awful lot else, to be honest, on the feet. It was the shift, the odd 1-2, the step up left outside kick. But that shifting right hook was pretty much everything. If you remember towards the end of the first round, he steps in with a shifting right hook and he throws a left straight afterwards from southpaw and he wobbles Makhachev where he's standing. He did, however, get dinged hard in the first round by shifting in, throwing the right hook, left straight, right hook, left straight, stood there in the pocket with Makhachev, and he got dinged and realised that Makhachev hits pretty hard. He's not the most technical striker in the world. He's not a great combination striker, but he's got a good eye for an opening. He's got decent timing, and he can clobber people with power. Whereas Max Holloway, not only not a huge hitter, but also measures himself, doesn't throw particularly hard if he doesn't have to. Makhachev will load up and swing. So that shifting right hook was a theme throughout the entire night. He was using it to get in, and then he'd throw the left low kick afterwards from southpaw, which landed really well. I would have loved to see more of that because it was the way that Makhachev was standing meant that he never ever checked low kicks and never avoided them because he was standing long because he liked to lean back with the because he liked to lean back with the counter right hook as Volkanovski was coming in, or swing in onto his lead leg with the big overhand left. So his legs were always there. And Volkanovski was getting them on the way out of combinations. Obviously, kicking against guys who want to pick up your legs, dangerous, but he did land a great deal of low kicks, and his corner was saying, yeah, his legs are getting tired now. So I imagine if they do a rematch, expect more low kicking. One thing that I like with that shifting right hook, he also does, he'll shift and then he'll throw the right hook to the body instead, and then throw the left straight upstairs. Lead hook to the body, rear straight to the head, classic setup, love it. One of my favourite things to do on the bag when I'm just arsing around is from orthodox, left hook to the body, right straight to the head, and then jab, cross, jab. Just finish with 3 punches. Body shot, head shot, 3 punches to finish, move your head, get offline. It's a really good way to just build some artificial volume, land a good shot, and then keep the guy off you if he, to stop him from countering or coming back. Liked Makhachev's kicking in this fight. He's always had a good left kick to the body, round kick and front kick. Those are annoying for Volkanovski, especially as he's dealing with such a length disparity. I was watching this knowing that Yair Rodriguez is getting the next title shot and going, yeah, that's something you're going to want to shore up when you fight Yair. The amount of left body kicks that went in fairly uncontested. But I think the thing that blew everyone's tits off, was the grappling. Islam Makhachev has obviously been a monster getting people on the mat. Really good at flattening people out, really good at muscling people around, or just holding people down when they start to wall walk. It's similar to Khabib. They just love when people start to wall walk, and they just follow them up to the feet. If they do get all the way up to the feet, they follow them up into the back body lock, and then they hit that mat return. One of the things that really interested me in this fight was, we talked about, there are going to be multiple ways to skin a cat where you're not meeting Islam or Khabib before this in their area of strength. We talked about turning off the fence. A great example of that is Mansour Barnoui, who had a great match with Islam Makhachev in a ring without a cage to wall walk on, but just by playing bottom really, really actively and creating momentum using it to sweep and come up. But he also had a great fight against one of their teammates recently, Shamil something or Zubarikov, or I can't remember his name. But that whole fight, the guy's taking him down, and Mansur Bano, he's in his half guard, and he's reaching out with his arm and leg and pushing off the fence to turn himself around so that he's not wall walking. So we talked about that maybe turning into the middle of the fence, but Volkanovski, when he was taken down along the fence, he was able to wall walk quite well. And what he did was he got back up to his feet and exposed the back. But one of the really interesting things about this, I had flashes of, he was like Sakuraba if someone had left a load of heavy books on top of his head. He was a sawn-off Sakuraba in this fight, because what he did was he stood up into the back body lock or turned his back when Makhachev clinched him. And instead of being along the fence, his head was against the top of his head was into the fence, and his arse was out towards the center of the cage, which made for some really interesting positions or really interesting follow-ups, because when you want to mat return someone or you want to lift someone, you get your arms locked around them from behind and you step around to the side, and you typically get your knee in front of their knee. So you can either pop your hips in and lift them, or you can just sag down on them and they'll fall down onto their knees. Watch like the Khabib Abel Trujillo fight, or watch Thiago Moises versus Islam Makhachev. Get in behind a guy, just keep mat returning him. It's a really low, not effort. I mean, it is effort, but it's not like lifting a dude or diving after someone's legs. You are just stepping around the corner and sagging on them and returning them to the mat. And if you watch some of the very good wrestlers out there in the world in pure wrestling, or if you watch Gary Tonin in grappling, he does this a lot because he turns his back a lot to do Victor rolls and get on the legs. But guys will stand up into the body, and the opponent will have the back body lock, and they will bend forward at the waist, put their hands out behind them like they're doing a little aeroplane thing, and the hands stop the guy's hips coming around the side of you. And by doing that, you can make a lot of their mat returns a lot harder, because if you're bent forward and your weight's a bit forward, they can't really lift you into a suplex without giving themselves a hernia. And if they want to try and step around you, your hands can block them, which is a fairly simple move in wrestling. And there are attacks that don't involve going into their hands, or that you can use to then free up space to try and get a mat return. But what happened here was that because Volkanovski's head was against the fence, even though he was fighting the hands, Makhachev couldn't step round the side of him and drive him forwards. If you go and watch that Trujillo-Khabib fight, that's full of mat returns. And he steps around the side and he drives Trujillo forwards like his face into the mat. But Volkanovski's face is on the fence. So what Makhachev does on two of these occasions is he steps around the side and he tries to sit down and pull Volkanovski on top of him. And the first time Volkanovski almost gets on top and then ends up just underneath him for the end of the first round, I think that was. And then the second time is when Volkanovski sort of ends up on top of him and then turns all the way over and gets up. And that was that huge moment where everyone was like, oh my God, he's able to get up against Islam Makhachev. And it wasn't because he got stuck under Islam Makhachev in the same positions that all those other dudes did. It's because Islam Makhachev didn't like where he was a bit annoyed, and tried to pull him down in a way that just gave Volkanovski the space to turn back into him and stand up. It was really quite slick. I mean, I don't know if there's any names for these things, but I've seen guys do it before, head into the fence and butt back. But typically, you'll see a lot of guys just leaning their shoulder on the fence and trying to fight the hands like that. You could see that Volkanovski was very disciplined about head into the fence, butt back. It did mean that Makhachev could try and put in a hook and get on his back standing, but that's less of a concern than just being dragged down over and over again. If you're Alexander Volkanovski, probably. I mean, he did end up with him on his back and got sort of stalled there. But that was once they were on the mat. It's work to get a guy from standing to the mat, even if you climb up on his back. So yeah, that was really interesting. That counter to the sort of fence work. When you watched Volkanovski turn Makhachev onto the fence himself, Makhachev is so wily from that position. We talked about it loads in the past. Back when Khabib was the champion, I was saying, look at Islam Makhachev for things to do when you're on the back of the back end of those cage wrestling exchanges, because he's the same size as Khabib and he's been Khabib's longest training partner. If anyone's dealing with it, it's him day to day. And what he's always done is he stands quite short, and he tends to he brings his feet sort of facing the same direction to the side. And what he'll do is he'll just dig these little knees to the body with an overhook and a hand on like a wrist or a V-block in the bicep. And he'll knee a guy in the body, and then they'll knee back. And when they knee back, he steps across and throws them. And he did it to Charles Oliveira in his last one. He did it to Thiago Moises. He's done it to a load of guys. Just with his back to the fence, he just gives you a couple of little knees. And they don't even look like they've got much on them because they're coming straight up. They're not even going in. But it's enough to make the other guy knee back. And he knows that when they're on one leg, he can throw him. So what I really liked was Volkanovski didn't fuck around with that. When he turned Makhachev onto the fence and Makhachev kneed him a couple of times, he, instead of trying to knee back hard, he did a little outside foot sweep, an outside trip, and framed off the face at the same time, freed his hands and started punching. And that's something that Volkanovski was doing loads in his early UFC run. If you watch his fight with Mizuto Hirota, he basically just pushes Hirota to the fence, frees his hands and starts swinging. And he does it loads of times and really hurts Hirota a couple of times. I really like that. Physically pushing the guy against the fence, freeing your hands, and hitting him while he's in a bad position to defend himself. Nobody wants to be boxing from a feet level stance against the fence. There was a really nice one in I think it was the fourth round. Volkanovski pushed him to the fence. He had the one underhook. Islam Makhachev was on the overhook and did the little knee. Volkanovski used his other forearm in front of Islam's face and started pulling his head down as if he was trying to knee him. Like Roman Dolidze versus Kyle Dorcas, or Josh Barnett versus Frank Mir. Pull their head down against the cage and knee him in the head. Because if the guy doesn't do something about it, a knee to the head is a very serious thing to take. And Makhachev's trying to stand up as he's pulling him down, and he lets go, knees him in the thigh instead, and then starts swinging on the way out. It was really nice. The breaks from clinches were lovely. That little outside trip, I like it because he wasn't getting, didn't seem to be a huge threat of him getting thrown off it, and he could use it to break and keep throwing punches. As with any close decision, there's a lot of talk about the back control, backpacking. Lots of people upset about that. Live by the sword, die by the sword. I loved it when Aljo did it to Petr Yan, and now I have to accept that Islam Makhachev did it to Alexander Volkanovski. I feel like Aljo was at least looking for chokes the entire time. Makhachev did seem to just want to keep the position. And it's sort of it's a catch-22 for Volkanovski, because if you try too hard to escape, you're going to make a fucking error, and he's going to slip that hand under your neck without having to hand fight you. I'm thinking of the one the other day. Alan Nascimento fought some lad. He got the back triangle on the ground. The lad was doing fine, and there was something like 40 seconds left in the round. I'm going, okay, well, he's out of that. Because at the end of the round, they start you on the feet again. But instead, he decided to walk up the cage, bridge off the fence, turn all the way over onto his belly, and he almost got flattened out and choked there. But then he stood up, he powered his way up so that he didn't get flattened out. But in doing that, he put both hands on the floor, and Alan Nascimento went, "Oh, there's your neck," and just grabbed it. So he ended up getting choked out standing from the body triangle instead of just being in the body triangle for another 40 seconds and restarting at the end of the round. And that is, it's a perfectly viable way to fight. It's as a lazy old man grappler nowadays, a lot of what I do is just wait for people to try and get out of fairly bad positions and grab things that I want when they do. It's a lot less work than trying to separate elbows and things like that. Separate elbows from the body, create submission opportunities. And then the Crackdown stuff was really interesting. Both Makhachev and Khabib like shooting their singles with the head on the outside and bringing you down onto a hip. Think of Khabib versus McGregor, the very first exchange of that fight. And the Crackdown is like a sort of, it's like a dogfight. It's either man could end up in a really good position off it. We talk about Rani Yahya using it a lot. Full-time Twitter reply guy Jake Shields used to do it a lot when he was a part-time fighter. But it's also, the opposite side of that is that the guy can get on your back or threaten to come up on your back. And a great example of that is Gordon Ryan versus Lucas Hulk Barbosa in ADCC. He went from a crucifix. He was on the crucifix on the back, but he didn't have any points for it. So he let himself sag down into a Crackdown where Barbosa was almost coming up on top of him. And then he used that to get onto the back properly. But Volkanovski was using the top part of the Crackdown well in this one. Cruz was talking about it, like if you can step over the ankle, you can start making stuff happen. And then the last notable moment of the fight was the knockdown in round 5. There were a couple of moments like this earlier in the fight. This one did hit him, but there was a couple of moments where Makhachev got back to the fence and Volkanovski came in punching and Makhachev sort of dropped to his knees to try and get a reactive takedown. And it looked really bad. It looked like he'd been hurt, but then you watched in slow motion again and nothing really landed. But he did seem to get flustered near the fence, and particularly in that last round when he was looking at the clock every 20 seconds. Pushing him back to the fence, he did not seem to like it. And it was the same with Khabib, in that one round against McGregor where McGregor got something going. Really doesn't like shooting off the back foot, really doesn't like working off the back foot much. Likes to be setting the terms of engagement himself. And then Volkanovski got on top in close guard and just started going body head like Mark Coleman way back in the day. It was a really good last round for him. The decision, neither here nor there. I could see 3-2 either way. I have trouble seeing 4-1, like that one judge got it. I would not call robbery either way. And I know that a lot of people are going to use this to be like, well, Islam Makhachev almost lost to a midget, but Islam Makhachev didn't almost lose to anyone else. So really, this fight is just, man, how good is Alexander Volkanovski? And the answer is incredibly good. If he isn't a star already in Australia, he deserves to be. And, the willingness to step up and put yourself on the line like that with that huge size disadvantage, when he already fights with a reach and range disadvantage in his own division, is, really commendable. So I'll quickly run down the other stuff that I saw. Yair Rodriguez versus Josh Emmett. Man, this was an arse-kicking. I feel like I should have seen this coming more because I was saying, Yair Rodriguez probably going to land a lot of good kicks on the outside. Josh Emmett circles around on the outside far too much. But I did think because Yair Rodriguez kicks so enthusiastically and frequently, Josh Emmett would get inside to him on one leg at some point and ding him. Because it's just a matter of if you keep stepping up the middle or trying to when the guy kicks, at some point you'll get it. But he didn't. Like Yair Rodriguez just kicked the stuffing out of Josh Emmett. And Josh Emmett, he likes fights where not a lot happens and then he lands a big bomb. Some of his fights have been painful. The Michael Johnson one, he just circled around for two and a half rounds before he decided to step in and land a good 1-2 or a good jab overhand or whatever it was. He is basically just the continuation of that Uriah Faber Team Alpha Male thing of, we've got a guy with a double leg and we're going to teach him to sprint into an overhand. It's not really striking, it's sprinting into an overhand. Now, what I really didn't like about Emmett in this one was that he started taking the kicks on his arm, and then late in the second round, when he was almost done, he started trying to cross-check them with his leg as well. I think if you've got someone who's a dangerous kicker, if you need a good example of this in MMA, Fedor versus Krokop is the best example. You've got a good kicker out there, a good round kicker, go out and take the kick on your shin or knee. Ideally you get it on your knee. Ideally you get it on both arms and your knee in the middle, and they break their shin or foot. But Yair Rodriguez can kick hard or was able to kick hard with complete disregard for hurting himself, because Josh Emmett, it was only his arms. Now, you can still kick the point of an elbow and hurt yourself that way, but you're not dealing with a solid barrier. I always talk about Jean-Charles Skalbowski. His instructionals are fantastic, but he had a fight with Buakaw back in the day when Buakaw was in his prime. And Skalbowski, I think he was what's the one that's not Lumpini? He was one of the stadium champions at the time, and he was going up in weight. So not only fighting Buakaw, but also up in weight. And what he was able to do was make Buakaw not kick very much. And he did it by really going belt and braces on these checks. He was lifting his leg up. He was taking both arms, trying to get like one elbow, one forearm, and one knee in the line of the kicks. And in the course of that, he really made Buakaw take a step back. Because there's having conditioned shins, but even if you have conditioned shins, you cannot be kicking bones as hard as possible when they're in good position, good checking position. So going to that as the last resort is always bad. Go to it first, because, the first few times someone throws their best weapon, those are the ones that you're going to struggle to get the timing on. Be more certain of yourself and use just your arms or try and step up the inside of it once you've seen it a few times, Do the reconnaissance from safety and then start trying to exploit it. Don't go to it when you're like, fuck, I'm already fighting with a missing rib, basically. But there were lots of cool setups for that. I mean, sometimes it wasn't set up at all, but some of the setups from Rodriguez on that left kick were lovely. He went from orthodox, he stepped in with his right leg, like pumped his right knee and stepped in, and then it stepped back. And then Rodriguez stopped, slid back in the same stance. So he went from orthodox to southpaw and then slid back in southpaw. And as Emmett stepped to him, he kicked him. It was fantastic, kicked him in the ribs. It was straight up Olympic taekwondo stuff, but in a professional fighting setting. Emmett took a hell of a beating, and eventually he got him down in the second round, and Rodriguez threw up a triangle choke. Rodriguez is very good off his back when you let him work, and if you're hurt already, you're definitely going to let him work. So Emmett, he thought he was getting a respite, and Rodriguez just kept attacking, and really impressive performance out of Yair Rodriguez. I was super impressed by the Max Holloway fight. The Brian Ortega one, he submitted he at least broke the arm of a very dangerous grappler. He's on a great run, and I will always say that he doesn't make the best strategic choices. He does fight like a bit of a loony a lot of the time. He does put himself too close to the fence a lot of the time. There's a lot of stuff that can be exploited, but when Max Holloway is struggling to, you're in a good spot. Someone as good as Max Holloway. So I'm not going to write off his chances against Alexander Volkanovski at all. I think he's a very dangerous fighter. I think Volkanovski, certainly against Makhachev, was taking more kicks than he should have. I know there's a lot more going on with Makhachev. There's a lot of stuff that he's more concerned with than the body kicks. But I'm really intrigued by that fight. Though I would love the rematch first. I'd love Makhachev versus Volkanovski too. But see what the UFC do. They might want to have them do one title defense each and then run it back. But I think with how dangerous both these guys, well, especially the lightweight division, but with how much each fight takes out of a fighter, and also just how dangerous the challenges are, you might want to just get it done now, because the rematch will generate tremendous interest off the first match. And it seems like they're willing to let Volkanovski do what he wants because he is so successful and also seems to be a bit of a star for them in the Antipodean market. Anything else? I saw Jack Della Maddalena versus Randy Brown. This was just good cage cutting. Randy Brown, long, gangly, throws lots of punches, with lots of straight punches rather, leaves his legs out there a lot, so a couple of good low kicks went in from Jack Della Maddalena. We were talking about this on the Boycast. He is my boy. He's been a follower of the podcast for a while, I believe, or the articles back in the day. But he's one of my lads. And Randy Brown, it was interesting because you saw him do the thing that got him caught twice before Maddalena caught him for it, where he'd, as Della Maddalena got close, he'd turn himself fully to his left and run out like bent over at the waist. And then Jack Della Maddalena cornered him, switched into southpaw, watched him start running out the side, went to him with the right hook, just cut him off, herded him beautifully into the right hook, and dropped him on his head. Literally spiked his head into the ground as he fell. Got on his back, got the rear naked choke. That was all she wrote. Anything else I liked about this card? It was good to see Kulibao beat Bagdarassian just because he was such a dick at the press conference. If you're laying hands on someone at a press conference, it's so lame. Just because you're also putting yourself at risk of them swinging on you or you hurting them, and then you don't get paid. This happened to Zab Judah, the legend. Zab Judah, one of his last fights. They got into a shoving match at the press conference, and they didn't pass a physical before like one of them got a turned ankle or something like that in a result of it, and they didn't get the go ahead for the fight. I like Klidson. I was about to say Klidson Abreu. Fuck no, I don't like Klidson Abreu. Klidson Rodriguez banged out Shannon Ross very quickly. That was fun. I'm going to talk about the rest of this later in the week, but I just wanted to come on and wax lyrical about that main event because it really was wonderful. And if you haven't seen it, from both sides, it was wonderful. Both men doing great stuff, great technicians at the height of their craft. It was kind of like Arman Sarukian versus, that series between Sarukian, Gamrot, Dariush, and Kutateladze. Just really high-level stuff. Maybe not all the drama of a McGregor versus of a Habib versus McGregor, or a Chandler versus Poirier. But this is the stuff I watch for. This is just beautiful, high-level craft. And also, it was kind of like the Max Volkanovski fights where the guys came in ready for each other. They knew what they were looking for. Makhachev was looking for those knees up the middle because of how Volkanovski fights against southpaw fighters. Volkanovski using that head on the fence stuff because he knows about the high reliance on mat returns by Makhachev, not falling for the knees to draw the knee along the fence. Just brilliant. Can't rave about it enough. If you didn't watch the card, I can't rave about anything else, but do watch that main event. It's fantastic. I will be back midweek. If you want to read the Advanced Striking 2.0 Alexander Volkanovski, you can read that. It's free. It's open for everyone. Go have a read. If you want to support the podcast, get the Boydcast, listen to the other episodes and all the other Advanced Striking articles and so on. Sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. I am your boy, Jack Slack, the best fighting the best and delivering the best fights. Bless.